There's this financial time bomb, and it's ticking away right at the heart of the global economy. But it's not where you might think. It's not in some volatile, faraway market. No, it's in the one place everyone always believed was the safest on Earth. We're talking about the United States national debt. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you how its unstoppable growth is setting the stage for the next worldwide financial crisis. Now, that might sound a little dramatic, right? But the crazy thing is, it might actually be an understatement. You should think of it less as a risk and more like a certainty that we're all hurtling towards. For decades, the entire global financial system has been built on a single promise: the stability of the US economy. And that promise, well, it's starting to crack. And look, this isn't some abstract problem just for economists over in Washington. Whether you're trying to get a mortgage in London, saving for retirement in Tokyo, or running a business in New Delhi, this financial reality is quietly shaping your world. It's messing with the cost of your loans, the value of your savings, even the security of your job. Understanding what happens next isn't just important, it is absolutely essential. So, how in the world did we get here? This isn't a story about one single bad decision. Oh no. It's more like a recurring political drama, one that's played out year after year in Washington, D.C. It's a cycle of brinksmanship in these last-minute deals, where the financial stakes for the entire planet just get higher and higher with every single performance. Okay, first let's get a couple of terms right so we're all on the same page. The national debt, it's not just this year's overspending. It is the grand total, the running tab of every single dollar the U.S. government has borrowed throughout its entire history. To put it simply, it's the country's mortgage, and believe me, it is massive. The annual deficit, on the other hand, that's the yearly shortfall. When the government spends more on things like Social Security, defense, and healthcare than it brings in through taxes, it runs a deficit for that year. And every single year there's a deficit, that number gets piled right on top of the national debt, making that mountain of debt even taller. So how does this whole cycle of spending and borrowing actually work? The political debates are designed to sound super complicated, right? Full of jargon that's really just meant to confuse you. But there's a really simple analogy that cuts through all the noise and shows you what's really going on. Just imagine Congress has a credit card. All year long, it's swiping that card to pay for everything it promised: military salaries, Social Security checks, new roads and bridges. The money has already been spent. The stuff has already been bought. So when you hear them arguing about the debt ceiling, that's like getting the credit card bill in the mail and then arguing about whether or not to pay for the things you already own. It's not about approving new spending. It's about making good on promises that have already been made. For decades, this system, as flawed as it is, kind of just chugged along. But recently, something has fundamentally changed. The debt isn't just growing anymore, it's accelerating. It is snowballing at a pace that has financial experts everywhere just holding their breath. Just take a look at this number: $38 trillion. It's a figure so huge, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. To put it in perspective for you, that is over $100,000 of debt for every single man, woman, and child living in the United States. But you know what? It's the speed of the borrowing that tells the real story here. Between August and October of 2025, the U.S. added another $1 trillion to its debt. It took just 71 days. That is the acceleration that has the entire world worried. This is no longer some slow-moving, chronic problem. This is an acute crisis, and it's starting to spiral out of control. And we've now crossed a terrifying tipping point. For the first time ever, the interest payments on the debt, so just the cost of servicing past borrowing, have blown past the entire U.S. defense budget. Just let that sink in for a second. America now spends more paying for its old debt than it does funding its entire military. This isn't just a warning sign anymore. This is just unsustainable. So how did this happen? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of factors. You've got decades of growing spending on big programs like Social Security and Medicare, major tax cuts that shrank the government's income, the multi-trillion-dollar costs of foreign wars, and now the final ingredient: rising interest rates, which act like gasoline poured on an already raging fire, making that massive pile of debt more and more expensive every single day. But this is not just America's problem to solve, not by a long shot. For nearly a century, the U.S. financial system has been the bedrock of the world's economy. And when that bedrock begins to crack, the tremors are felt in every corner of the globe. So, who exactly is the US indebted to? Well, a huge chunk is held by other countries. Japan is the largest foreign creditor, holding over $1 trillion in US Treasury bonds. The UK and China are also major players. These countries bought US debt because, for the longest time, it was considered the safest investment in the world. Their own financial stability is now directly tied to America's ability to pay its bills. Now, check out this trend. China, for years, one of the biggest buyers of U.S. debt, is systematically selling it off, slashing its holdings by nearly half. This isn't just a minor financial adjustment, this is a powerful geopolitical signal. It means one of the world's largest economies is deliberately moving away from the U.S. dollar, and that signals a deep, deep loss of confidence in America's ability to manage its own finances. The domino effect is crystal clear. To convince people to keep lending it money, the US has to offer higher and higher interest rates. But those higher rates in the US force borrowing costs up for everyone, everywhere, strangling economic growth around the world. And if the world's faith in the US ever truly breaks, the dollar itself could falter, creating absolute chaos for every country that holds its savings in what was once the world's safest currency. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This is not speculation. The warnings are now coming from the very top, from the most powerful financial leaders on the planet. The people who actually run the system are sounding the alarm loud and clear. The most predictable crisis in history. When the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, America's largest bank, uses words like that, the world sits up and pays attention. He's not talking about some random, out-of-the-blue event. He's describing a slow-motion train wreck that everyone can see coming, but nobody is stepping in to stop. And here's the guy in charge of the U.S. Central Bank, the person whose entire job is to ensure financial stability. His assessment is just as blunt. The path America is on is simply unsustainable. He has warned that the country is, and I quote, effectively borrowing from future generations, which is a very polite way of saying the bills are eventually going to come due and it's not going to be pretty. And then came the final verdict from the financial world of the referees. For over a century, U.S. debt held the highest possible credit rating, a perfect score. That era is over. Now, all three major rating agencies, S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, have downgraded the United States. Their message to the world is official and unambiguous. Investing in America is no longer risk-free. And finally, the world's financial watchdog, the IMF, confirms it. This is not a domestic American political issue. It is, in their own words, a primary risk to the stability of the entire global economy. The consensus is clear, and frankly, it is overwhelming. So, all of this leads to one critical, terrifying question. Is there a point of no return? A level of debt so high that the entire system just breaks? Well, according to some economic models, there is. So, where is that breaking point? Well, economists often look at a country's debt not as a raw number, but as a percentage of its entire economic output, its GDP. And that leaves us with the ultimate question. For now, the world keeps lending, and the system holds together. For now. But this is a crisis built on compounding numbers and eroding faith. A crisis that is, as we heard earlier, predictable. And so we are all left to wonder, what happens to the global economy when the most predictable crisis in history finally runs out of time?